Hi guys, HC65MA here. We'll be talking about the AB412 switch panel configuration today. So it has a lot of switches of different types. Some of them are spring loaded, like this one. Some of them are toggle type, and they can be assigned to 4 different types that will make them work in 4 different ways. So let's look at it a bit closer. Here we have the master controller.ini file. This is the configuration section. You can see configuration, and inside the configuration section we have these lines here. There are 4 arrays of switches, different types. These numbers here are just the joystick button numbers in Windows joystick properties. So for example, you want button 17, for example, to be assigned to the push button type. This is the first array, so you just place it here into this array. So the first array is for switches that you want to be push buttons. So basically it is pressed while you hold it. When you release it, it releases the button. It's pretty easy. These switches here are assigned to this type. So this type of switch supports the mode switch. Mode switch is here on the side, or you can assign any of these switches to be a mode switch. Obviously you have to assign some toggle type switch, not the spring loaded one. You can do it somewhere here. Yeah, here, this line. You can set the button number in joystick properties here, and it will work as a mode switch. It will no longer show as the joystick button. Yeah. So about the mode switch, what it does, it allows to assign the same physical switch. For example, let's look at, I don't know, well, let's look at this button 17. So you can see in mode switch middle position, when I press the red button, it presses the button 17 here. Then if I flip it up, it becomes button 81, and if I flip the mode switch down, it becomes button 49. If I set it back to the middle, button 17 again. This is how mode switch works and what it does. There are also some special functions, like these 2 switches. They are starter and idle stop switch in the real 412. So because of how X-Stride in 412 works, these switches are reserved for start up and shut down. So in the middle position of mode switch, they won't show as joystick buttons. You can see that's because these switches are reserved. They actually send some keyboard presses to the Lua script, which listens for them and pulls some data refs in the 412 in explain. So if you want the switches to be joystick buttons, you can simply flip the switch up or down, mode switch, and you can see it's button 74 and 73, this one 75, 76. So you can use these two switches in two modes. They will be different buttons, and when you will need to shut down or start up your helicopter, you can switch it back to the middle position, and the switches will send these special key bindings to the sim. Now I believe that the push button type is explained now. Let's move to the next type. So these are the toggle switches. Toggle switches are for emulating the key press. So basically, if there's some action in your simulator that requires a key press, like gear for example, so you can assign the switch you want to extend and retract your gear to the toggle type switch. So for example, I have this switch as a toggle type switch. You can see what it does right here. It's buttons 3 and 4. So basically it emulates two way switches behavior. So when the switch goes up, it presses button 3. When the switch goes down to the middle, it presses button 3 again. So if you want, for example, your gear to be pulled up, you can press it, your gear will go up, and your switch will remain here in the up position. So when you want your gear down, you just press it back to the middle, and it presses the same button again, and your gear will retract again. So pretty simple. When you use these two simple switch types, they can be used together. For example, you can assign button 3 to the push button type, and button 4 to the toggle type. So they will act like when you move switch up, it will act as the push button. When you move switch down, it will act in this way, like a two-way switch. So sometimes it can be useful. There are quite a lot of functions you can use this type for. Then let's talk about this type of switches do not support mode switch. So basically, why? Because if you retracted your gear, for example, and then you switch it your mode, then you see your gear, for example, let's see you have the landing light or whatever assigned here, you flip it down, you retract it, and then you understand you need to actually land, and you flip your mode switch back, and you see your gear lever is in down position, so your gear will be retracted. It's not what you expect. So this type of switch does not support mode switch operation. So one more time, it presses the button when it goes up, and it presses the same button when it goes back to the middle. Same thing when it goes down. This is the toggle type switch. Next switch type is selector button type switch. So you can see that button 20 is active all the time from the beginning. Why? Because this little switch is configured as the selector button type switch. What does it mean? When you push your switch up, it presses and holds the button, so button 14 in this case. When you hold while you hold it, it will be pressed. When you release it, another button is pressed and held. When you press it down, another button, the third one, will be pressed and held. And when you release it, the middle button will be up again. So the middle button will be always pressed. For some functions, it is the very useful switch type. I'm not remember for what exactly, but I've been using it for DCS Huey for its collective head. So this switch mode supports mode switch. So basically, let's look how it works here. I just flipped it up. You can see it's now button 78 and button 84 is now pressed. It's the middle button for mode switch 1. 77, 84, 78, 84, 77, 84. Then if I will return it to the middle position, 14, 20, 13, 20. So this way you can use one switch for 3 different functions of this type, which is cool. It also supports some interesting behavior. For example, let's see what will happen if I will press this switch. You can see button 14 is up, and then I will flip the mode switch to the top position, and then I will release the switch. You can see that button 14 is still up. Then I will press it. You can see 78, 84, 77, 84, 78, 84. All this time button 14 remains pressed. Then I will return the mode switch to its middle position. You can see button 14 is still pressed. If I want to disable it, I will push the switch back up. You can see it's still pressed, and then I will release it and it goes back to middle position. Button 20 is pressed. So this may or may not be what you can expect from the switch when you're using mode switch. So basically it will be a good idea to put it to the middle position when flipping mode switch with this type of switches, or otherwise you can just use it as a useful function. Then there's the last switch type left. It's the mode selector switch. It's the same thing like the selector button switch, but it works just like the toggle switch. It also presses 3 buttons, but it presses it for short time. So basically it's this switch. I have this switch assigned to this type. When you push the switch up, it presses the button for a short time and releases it. Then when I push the switch to its middle position, you can see it presses another button and then releases it, and when I push it to the down position, it does the same thing with another button. So this can be useful as well. This type of switch does not support mode switch, so it will act as the same buttons in different switch modes, in different mode switch positions. So the same thing, by the way, goes for other toggle type switches. In different mode switch positions, toggle type switches will remain will press the same exact buttons as is position 0, middle position of the mode switch. So that's it. This is pretty much all the configuration that there is for these switches. I would like to hear from you guys if you think I have forgotten to add some nice switch mode that will be useful. I will definitely add it. Then I want to show you one more nice collective function that can be useful for people with motion platforms, or if you like to use very soft tension on your lever like me. I like it very lightweight, so it will barely hold itself. So I like things smooth. So let's look at this function. You can see I pull the collective up and the axis moves. Then in mode switch position, in middle mode switch position, I can press this button and I can drop the collective. I can move it. Nothing happens. This is the collective hold option. So if I want my collective to move again, I can press this button here again, but you can see that the axis is still where it was. So it will continue to move only when you will pull the collective, so it will be in the close vicinity of the current axis value. So you can see it moves again. So you can expect that there will be no sudden bump and attitude change when you will release the trim. It's another cool function that I use sometimes. Very useful in cruise flight. Well, that's pretty much it. The Huey collective head has the same exact configuration. You can see it's the same for arrays here. You can assign buttons to them the same way. By default, the Huey head will be configured for the DCS Huey. Obviously, it was done for DCS Huey. It has some specific options for DCS Huey, like the start up and shut down capability, which is pretty much the only joysticks that can do it. it is done with the keyboard commands, just like it's done here. It's not perfect, but it works. But this is probably a case for another video. So thanks for watching. I hope the configuration is a bit clearer now. Please ask questions if you have any. I will gladly help you with all the setup. Thanks for watching. Bye guys.